So I think we're going to just get started. I would like to welcome you all to this webinar by Holberg EEG, where we're going to focus on the SCORE EEG Educational Platform. So my name is Øyvind Gulbrandsen. I'm the CEO with the Holberg EEG, and I also have with me here Dr. Harald Øverlien, which is a clinical neurophysiologist at the University Hospital here in Bergen, and also Chief Medical Officer in Holberg, and one of the founders of the company. So initially, I just want to say a few words about the SCORE standard. What you see now on the slide is the front page on the latest SCORE article, which was published in Clinical Neurophysiology back in November last year. So this is a tremendous work that has been going on for the last 8-9 years, starting up as a European initiative with a publication in Epilepsia in 2013. And since then, the SCORE consortium has grown to also include members in the US and in Asia. And now with this latest publication, this is the new standard for how to report EEGs. So this is kind of the basis for the software that we have developed in Holberg, and also the basis for what we're going to show you here today in the educational platform. You're probably also aware of this Niedermeyer, the electroencephalography EEG book. And there was a new revised version that came out also late last year. And in this book, there is now a full chapter which is dedicated describing the SCORE standard. So together with Oxford Press, which is the publisher of the Niedermeyer's EEG book, we have developed an educational platform. So this platform is what we're going to show you here today. And we're going to show you how you can use this library, because this platform now contains EEG cases, more than 120 EEG cases from various fields that you can go in and you can look at. This is a web-based platform, so you can log in and register, and then you can get access to all these examples. You can then score an EEG, and in the end you can compare your scoring and your EEG report to the report from an expert. So just to give you a short information about how you can get access to this platform. During the registration process, you will be prompted to enter a kind of a registration code or a scratch code. So this code can be, you can get this code by sending an email to info@holbergeeg.com. Then we will provide you with information on how to log in and a dedicated scratch code that you use during the registration. Also, if you buy the Niedermeyer EEG book, inside that book there is a small piece of paper with a code on it, and that code you can also use for registering on the educational platform. So what you would have to do then is to take this code, and you can go to scoreeg.com, which will bring you to our webpage, which looks something like this, and you can register and you type in that scratch code, and then you will get access to the educational platform. So in that process, you will download a small file. This is a remote desktop solution, and you register a new user. You will also have to verify this via your email before you can get access. You download and you can save this remote desktop app on your desktop, so you don't have to really go into the registration page and log in every time. You can just double click on the remote app. What we also have seen is that in some hospitals there are restrictions for web pages to access. So sometimes some of our users have reported that they cannot access the educational platform. And what you would have to do in those cases is to contact your local IT and there is also a description on what kind of information you can provide to your local IT so that they can open up so you can access the educational platform. Yeah, so I'm just going to, also if you go into our webpage on scoreeg.com, there is also a small video tutorial here that will show you how to navigate in the software, and there is also a short tutorial which will help you getting started in the registration process. So for any of you participating in this workshop, if you would like to register, if you don't have a code, you can send me an email afterwards to info@Holberg EEG, and I will provide you with an access code for the platform.
Okay, so then we start it from over again. So again, there are two ways that you can enter the studies you would like to look at when using the educational platform. And you here have these two tabs, SCORE Studies and View Findings. The SCORE Studies tab you would use when you would like to see a total description of a study, either to see the study, how the tutor has scored this EEG, or if you would like to score the study yourself. We'll come back to this. Then there is this View Findings tab, where the studies are tagged according to the findings directly. So this is the findings oriented tab. So if you would like to just have a brief look at the specific type of finding, you would use this View Findings tab. If I now, for example, would like to look at some specific patterns of uncertain significance, which is one of the folders in SCORE, and I would like to look at breach rhythm, then you can see here you have now two examples of EEGs, including breach rhythm. And when I click the individual examples here, I can see both the description of the finding itself. I can see a screenshot of this finding, and then I can see a screenshot here again of this breach rhythm. You have it here. Or if you would like to open the EEG itself containing this activity, you click here on Open EEG. So now this EEG is opening and streaming this from the server here. We have a server in Germany and we have another server in US. So here we have opened this EEG containing this breach rhythm. Another thing is now that how to select the montages. You can see here that some of these channels are not used. So this was recorded with 19 sensors, and we can choose the montages here. So now choose a common average 19 sensors, and you will see it more correctly here. And paging back and forth can be done either by using the mouse pointer like this, and if you are close to the middle of the screen, you browse back and forth in small steps. And you can use page up and page down by going back and forth as well, or in small steps with 1 second with arrow left and arrow right. Furthermore, you can adjust the amplitude with up and down here, and also sweep speed back and forth. Okay, so now we close this and go back to the to select another study. So now I would like to go back to the SCORE Studies tab, and there I will now choose from the taggings of the studies. So now I would like to see a study including intrictal finding and furthermore epileptiform intrictal activity. And here I can see these head models, and these are the findings from the tutor. And here vertical lines here means epileptiform activity, while horizontal lines means non-epileptiform abnormalities. And if there is a head model also in this student findings column, then you have also opened this EEG and touched this and started describing it yourself. We can now open this study of this 49-year-old female, and here you again get these choices. Either I could now open the EEG as the tutor to see how the tutor has described this EEG, or I could just more briefly look at the report from the tutor. But now I would like to describe this study myself, and I then click description, and I then open the study in the SCORE mode, and also it will open the EEG itself. Then you have these two tabs where you can see the referral information. So here this was a 49-year-old female patient with febrile seizures during childhood and unprovoked seizures since the age of 14. It was therapy resistant and has tried 6 types of anti-epileptic drugs. And furthermore, she was now, the indication for EEG was now pre-surgical evaluation. And here you could also see more information concerning the referral. She has had her last episode less than 1 week ago, and she has more than 1 seizure per week. And for the medication, she uses oxcarbamazepine. And in this recording session conditions, you can see this is often filled in by the technologists that that she was awake, oriented, but also some drowsiness during the recording. Then we have this workflow down here. So now we have patient information with just the surname, the first name and last name, gender, and things like that. We have the recordings information, which we just have looked into. And then we could move further on to findings, where we describe the EEG itself. And usually when we use this system in production, we always use 2 screens. So one for the SCORE system and one for the EEG. But here, when we only have 1 screen, we have a selector here where we can choose either the SCORE or the EEG or a split screen. So let's now have a look at the EEG itself here now. And I'm browsing a bit further now. We here the patient has eyes open. Here the eyes closes. We can see the background activity with the posterior dominant rhythm. We can use now a fast Fourier analysis to evaluate this further. This was 12 Hertz. And it is responsive to eye opening, and it's quite symmetrical. But to describe this now, we should now describe what, or mark what we would like to describe. So here we have 3 markers. We have one grapho element marker. If we mark something with this, then we will see that it will end up in this unclassified folder. But this, now we will use a specific marker for the posterior dominant rhythm. So I now I click on posterior dominant rhythm and mark the segment where I can find this activity. And then you can see that this is picked up now by the SCORE system as posterior dominant rhythm. And I can click here and put in the further information concerning this activity. So I click on frequency, and the frequency I found to be 12 Hertz, and amplitude was medium high, it was symmetrical, and it was reactive to eyes opening. Okay, then I will proceed with to describe more of this EEG. So here we can see this low frequency activity in the left frontal temporal region. Then I insert a marker to come back to this later and describe this further. And then we can see some more sharp waves here as well. I add a marker for this as well. And furthermore, we can see here some drowsiness with the slow rolling eye movements, so indicating that the patient is drowsy. I add a marker for that as well. And I can just quickly go through the EEG like this. We have more of this sharp activity, this epileptiform activity. If I like, I could mark a couple of those, but it's not expected that you should mark every of those type of activity. You should just have examples to show. Okay, I'll just briefly go through the EEG here now. There is quite a lot of these eye movement artifacts. So if I like, I could also describe that there are some of these artifacts. And furthermore, I go just quickly through this. And here is the photic stimulation. And we can here see a beautiful photic driving. And I can see this was photic driving 13 Hertz. We can see here that this is exactly also 13 Hertz photic driving. And I can insert a marker of that as well. And this is actually basically the findings of this EEG. And I go back to score these elements. So when I now double click the first of these inserted elements, I found this low frequency activity. So this is interictal finding, and it's abnormal rhythmic activity. And this was the morphology of this was theta activity, maybe also some delta activity. And the location of this can be set just by clicking the sensors where I see this activity. And this is also now represented on the head model. Okay, and then if I like, I can also now have a screenshot of this into the report. I then click screenshot, and this automatically now also goes into the report and is indicated by this icon. I go to the next element, which was this sharp waves, which was interictal epileptiform activity. And the morphology of this was sharp wave, and we saw also some sharp and slow wave activity. So, and the location of this is again set just by clicking the sensors where I see this activity. And then I can also, then I can move on to the next element, which was this drowsiness with slow rolling eye movements. This was sleep and drowsiness. I click drowsiness, and this is described. Okay, and okay. Okay, so then I go to the next element, which was just a new example of this epileptiform activity. I can then just drag it on the top of the other one, and then we have two examples of the same activity. When I double click here again, it navigates to this part, which was this artifacts, this eye blinking artifacts. So this was artifacts, it was biological artifacts, and eye blinks. If I like, I could also set the significance of this. Is this making the recording not interpretable or not? I would say that we have also parts of the EEG where we can see more what's going on. So I would not say it interfered with the interpretation of the recording. Okay, and then we have the last finding, which was this occipital drive response, which is also a physiologic pattern, and which was here photic driving. So now I've described this EEG, and then finally I should set the diagnostic significance. So now this was for sure an abnormal recording, and it's supporting the diagnosis of epilepsy, and furthermore focal epilepsy. So then I would now have the report with the patient administrative information, and the type of EEG comes automatically, and also the performed modulators and procedures also comes automatically. And here are the findings I inserted with the background activity, posterior dominant rhythm, and the drowsiness, and the interictal finding with both abnormal low frequency activity, which appears here as the horizontal lines, and then the epileptiform activity, which appears as the vertical lines. And this is actually the first thing that your referrals will look at, because here in less than 1 second, then they will get the main message with this EEG. Then you also get a representation of, or the screenshot you inserted directly into your report. Then I would sign it and generate the final report. So, and in our hospital, this is also integrated with the electronic medical record. So now within 20 seconds, it's also uploaded into the electronic medical record. Okay, but then we can go back and look at another study. So then I go back again to home here to be able to navigate to another study. So now I would like to not to look at the interictal findings, but now I would like to look at some episodes. And I choose now to look at the frontal lobe seizure and look into this 32-year-old male. And I click here to describe it myself, while again, I could also have opted to look at the tutor's description directly. So I can then have a look at the referral information and see that this is a 32-year-old male with pharmacoresistant focal epilepsy referred to long-term monitoring for pre-surgical evaluation. And then I move on to the findings here in the workflow, and I open the I click here to see the EEG itself. Okay, so now first here the patient is sleeping, and so I could here, if I like, insert a marker to indicate that he's asleep. And see some spindle activity again. And then we can see this rhythmic activity building up here in the left frontotemporal region. And which we will see also, we can see the semiology of this seizure. So then I will mark this as a seizure with this episode marker. So we call it episode because this can include both epileptic seizures and also non-epileptic seizures. So I click here and mark the start and the stop of this seizure. And then I could also have a marker for this initial EEG finding itself as well. So now I'm going to describe this seizure. We can see here that we have a new finding in the episode folder, and then we have this underlying structure. Here we can classify the seizure itself according to the new ILE classification, and we can also classify the semiology also according to the ILE classification. And the semiology and EEG can be described both during the initial phase and the subsequent phase and the post-ictal phase. So we could start now with describing this EEG activity that started this seizure. So now I would like to move this activity into this episode structure. Then I could either drag and drop it, but I could also use this right-click functionality, right-click and cut. And then I mark the button with the initial EEG finding, and I right-click again and click paste here. So then I have a new unclassified finding for the EEG in the initial phase. And this was ictal EEG activity, which was rhythmic activity. And it was located here in the frontotemporal region. And so then we can see the location here. And furthermore, when we click the properties tab here, we can set the frequency of this activity. We can also measure this activity. Here in the beginning, it was between 8 and 10 Hertz. And but later on, it's dropping a bit in the frequency. So there is also an evolvement in this. So the frequency of this rhythmic activity was like 8 to 10 hertz. And then we should have a look also at the semiology of this seizure. So we click here the video button and click play. So yeah, so now the patient is sleeping, and I think it goes about 20 seconds before the semiology is showing here as well. So this is hypermotor hyperkinetic seizure. Yeah. And here the seizure is over, and the patient is responsive. He knows where he is, and he is asked to lift his left arm, and he responds to that. Okay, so now we'll try to describe this total seizure in SCORE. So we have started with describing the EEG activity during the initial phase, and then in the subsequent phase of the EEG, we can insert a new finding there, and then it was actually just obscured by artifacts. And in the postictal phase, it's quite fast also returning back to I made a mistake there. It was returning back again then to no observable change after the seizure. While in the semiology, in the initial phase, I click New Finding. It was no observable manifestation because the start was defined by the EEG start here in about 20 seconds. Then in the subsequent phase, we saw this motor and automatisms and hyperkinetic. And in the postictal phase, it was quick recovery of consciousness. Okay, so now we have described the initial, subsequent, and postictal phase of both the semiology and the EEG. Then we can classify the seizure itself according to the ILE classification. So this was an epileptic seizure with focal onset. We can also, if we like, specify further into this tree, but we could also opt to stop here. Then we have also more possibilities of clinical relevant features to describe concerning this seizure. So there was some evolution there in frequency, and the consciousness was affected. I don't actually know about the awareness of the episode, so I keep that not scored. And the EEG started the episode, followed by clinical start by about 20 seconds. And if you would now have a kind of 3-4 days of recordings, then you could have said here that you had kind of 12 episodes of this same type. But here we only have one. And this always arose from sleep, And the duration of this, I can see here that this was 37 seconds. So I set in the duration of this seizure, 37 seconds. And I could also, and this will do for now. And I could set also now modulators that this was facilitated by sleep. So now we have described the seizure, and then we should also set the diagnostic significance again of this study, which was again an abnormal recording, and it's supporting the diagnosis of epilepsy, furthermore focal epilepsy, and it's unifocal, and it's frontal, and it's left frontal. So then we would have a report like this with the seizure classification itself and the properties concerning the seizure, and then the semiology and the EEG, both in subsequent postictal, initial, subsequent, and postictal phase. Okay, so then we can move over to a new type of EEG. So now we have looked at an EEG with intrictal findings, and we have looked at another EEG with episodes with a special template for that. And then we can look now into another type of EEG with also another template, which is the rhythmic and periodic pattern in critical ill patients. So then we will have a look at this EEG, which we can see here now is an EEG from a 59-year-old male patient with a post-anoxic injury after cardiorespiratory resuscitation. And this is the EEG from 1 day after normothermia. And the patient is comatose. So let's have a look at this EEG. So now there are, so let's first have a look at the continuity of this EEG. We see these periods of suppression here lasting up to 4 seconds. So we can describe this. This indicates burst suppression. But here we also have this periodic discharges, which is defined by there is a clearly room in between the discharges, and the discharges is not exceeding 0.5 seconds and not more than 3 phases. So this is the periodic discharges. So I can also make now place a marker for this periodic discharges as well. And we move on to the in the recording, and we see further on here that here we have a nociceptive stimulation. I can also insert a marker to describe that nociceptive stimulation has been performed. And you can see also that neither the burst suppression nor the periodic discharges is affected by the nociceptive stimulation. Okay, so let's now describe this in the score. So now we have these 3 elements. The first one was representing the background activity. So the background activity, we click at special features, and this was then burst suppression activity. So, and with the burst suppression, we also saw that we can say that this was covering 20 to 50% roughly of this recording, while the others were more the rhythmic patterns. And then we have duration of the suppressions were less than 4 seconds. Then we can go to the next finding, which was this rhythmic and periodic pattern. And then I choose here rhythmic and periodic patterns in critical ill. And the first thing I should then choose is one of these 3 main entries in rhythmic and periodic patterns, which could be periodic discharges, rhythmic delta activity. Then we would not have these periods in between these discharges, or also the spike, polyspike, sharp wave activity. But this was now periodic discharges. And then we can also see here that there is some overriding fast activity here as well in some of these. And so these are the superimposed activity, superimposed fast activity. And you can also enter all of these features if you like. And so these were 3 phases, and it was medium absolute amplitude. And of course, since it was so low, it was suppressed in these burst suppression periods. It was relative amplitudes also more than 2 compared to the background activity. And polarity was mainly negative. Then when we go to now the location and say that, okay, this is bilateral activity. And then when we say that this is both bilateral and we say that it's also symmetrical, then first now you can see here that now it's the name of this is called generalized periodic discharges plus superimposed fast activity. And you can see also now if I say that if I would say that it's bilateral independent, then it would automatically now change names to BIPDs, also, so then bilateral independent periodic discharges. And if I would say that it was multifocal, then it would change to multifocal periodic discharges. But since it's not, I changed that back again to not multifocal and bilateral synchronous. So these type of rules is implemented to help us to choose the correct type of activity and to be more consistent in our scoring. We can also now say that when we now click at the modulators here, we can say that this type of activity, we can say if it's spontaneous or if it's stimulus induced. But let's now also describe here the last type of activity, which was this nociceptive stimulation. So I click here, modulators and procedures, and I found here nociceptive stimulation, like here. So now I've described that I have done nociceptive stimulation. Then when I go back to the general periodic discharges, and if I now click at the modulators, then you can see that I can say something about how is this activity modulated by this procedure, the nociceptive stimulation. But note also that when I tried to do that just now before, this was not appearing. And this is also because we do not want to present to you also not relevant features. That's something that is also applied throughout the software, that if we would have presented all possible entries, then you would have been overwhelmed by not relevant entries. But here you can say that this is unmodified by nociceptive stimulation. If there was some semiology also related to this, we could have entered this here as well. But now we will finally set the diagnostic significance of this, which was now diffuse central nervous system dysfunction. I go to report and get the final report now, and then if I like, I could also have a summary of the findings, but I could also say that it's not necessary here because it's quite clear that this is burst suppressions and GPDs. And then I sign it and generate final report. Okay, so let's now briefly go to the last EEG of this session. And then I would like to show you also that we have a special template also for the neonates. So I click on the example, then I see that this was a 3-year-old term baby with tuberous sclerosis. And now I would like to directly look at the tutor's description. So I click tutor description here, and then you automatically open both the study in the SCORE application and also in the EEG. So now there is a special template now, as you would see. So first of all, we have now, instead of the term background activity, it's here called ongoing activity. And the ongoing activity can be classified both during awake and during sleep. Here the patient was awake, and the background activity is scored concerning the continuity, which was here normal continuity, but mostly asynchronous between the two sides of the brain. I can change the montage now to 19 sensors montage. And I can now have a look at what are the examples of the activity that the tutor now has described. I click now, I see now that he has described 4 types of epileptiform activity with different locations. I hover over it, I can see the location of this finding. And when I double click it, you can see here this finding, which was the here occipitoparietal activity. I double click this activity where you see it more in the frontal region, and there you can see we have 3 examples of this activity. So I double click here and I navigate to these examples. And furthermore, the third example here with on the left-sided activity. So now the tutor opted to describe this as 4 different entries with epileptiform activity. There is also a possibility for a shortcut here where you could have described the 1 entry with sharp wave or some epileptiform activity, but in the location you can then have opted to mark all the sensors where you see this type of activity, but then click multifocal. So then you could have just marked have 1 entry, but say it's multifocal. Okay, and then you can see now that he has also described a seizure. So, and there are two examples of this seizure again. So here is the first one, and here is the last one of these seizures. So we can then again have a look at this seizure in the semiology. And first we can see this sharp slow wave activity in the left frontal and frontotemporal region. And yeah, and then there should be some twitching also in the oro-elementary here. It's I don't know if you can see this also in the around the mouth of the patient. And so now we can have a look now also at the report of this, where you see this intrictal findings and the episode with seizure with automatisms, where if you look at this, you would see some automatisms, some oro-elementary, and also some clonic, semiology. And in the EEG, there was initially this sharp and slow waves in the right frontal region, while it spread also later to the right central frontal temporal region. And in the conclusion, we saw he has inserted also a summary of the findings with multifocal interictal epileptiform discharges and 2 focal seizures with onset in the right frontal temporal region. And then the mandatory diagnostic significance, which was multifocal epilepsy. And then the screenshots also inserted into the report. Okay, so now we have worked us through the some examples of how to use the SCORE platform. And what I did not mention, but what you could be aware of also, is that there is also a possibility now to change language. When I click up here, there we have quite a lot of languages implemented here. And so when you describe for yourself, you could use the language you are most familiar with. However, the tutor's descriptions, they are actually now set up as a PDF, so they will not change, and also not these tagging codes, but other entries in the scorings will then come in the other language. Okay, so Øyvind, do we have any specific questions?
Yeah, we've had a few questions during the session, Harald, but most of them have been answered, so there are not really any left for you now. And I think if any of you have additional questions that you would like to raise based on what Harald have talked about, just drop us an email at info@holbergeeg.com, and that's the same address that you should use if you would like to get an access code for the educational platform.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think that's all for now, Harald. We have spent 1 hour, so
Yeah.
I think thank you very much, Harald, for taking the time, and I hope everybody enjoyed this webinar. Let's see, maybe there is another. Can we export the analysis, for example, as JSON? It's a question, Harald.
We in the educational platform, you cannot export directly, but in the hospital application, then you can export the reports in different formats. You can either export it as Excel or as PDF or RTF, but in JSON we cannot directly export it as it is for now, but this for sure is something that is interesting, and we have also now a search tool that is under development, and there we will use this type of formats as for example this JSON format. So that would in the future also be possible, but not directly now.
Okay. Yeah. Well, then I think we'll stop here, Harald. Again, thank you very much for giving us a great introduction to the educational platform.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.